And so it's just, Ben was wonderful, and he sent me a few notes from, I think last time you took this bill up was the morning that I wasn't here.
Yes.
And so I thought I'd start with addressing some of the things that he sent me some notes on, and you had some questions on, if that's okay.
Okay. And we are live. Good morning, this is Senate Judiciary, April 10th, 2024, and May 10th, 2024 has been chosen as the adjournment date, so we are now 1 month away from a proposed adjournment of the 2024 session of the Vermont Legislature. And we'll see how much we live up to that. But this committee has about 3 weeks left to do its work, and we'll try to do it well. And this is H563 we're taking up today with Michelle Childs. It's a bill that has to do the unlawful trespass in the motor vehicles and unauthorized operation of motor vehicles or car theft. So.
Good morning.
Good morning. I almost called you Madam President. Michelle.
So I just wanted to circle back on some questions that you had when I missed last week's meeting, and Ben did a great job, I think, of communicating some of the issues that were raised. Senator Sears, you had raised the issue about wanting to know whether or not the surcharge in 1094 in operation without the owner's consent would still apply, and that's not affected by this bill. So so that $50 surcharge that goes towards, I think, for DUI enforcement still applies. So there's no change to that. Senator Baruth had a question about wanting to know more about in the OOC section, in section 3, about the purpose of the phrase continues to operate. I took a look at the case law. I didn't see anything necessarily addressing that specific point. But I would just say, in looking at the language that you have currently in the statute, which is repeated in the new language, it says a person who takes, operates, uses, or continues to operate when they don't have the consent of the owner. I would just interpret, from a plain meaning, plain language interpretation that, it could be that someone is operating and then is, gains knowledge that they are not, that they do not have consent to be operating and then continues to do so. But that is a part of the existing statute, and I didn't see anything in the case law that was really addressing that particular issue. Let's see. And then Senator Sears, you had a question about section 1 on attempts and whether this is necessary. This is just a policy decision for you. So I do believe, and I think the practitioners who work with this can correct me if I'm wrong, but for grand larceny, if you were to steal a motor vehicle, it's different from OOC in that for OOC, you need to be operating the motor vehicle, and that's an essential element of the crime. But you could arguably steal a vehicle, but not be operating it. You could tow it away, or I guess in some other kind of way, steal and take possession of that vehicle without operating.
But I thought A would cover that.
It is covered under existing law with grand larceny, and you don't need to add a lesser penalty for attempts. You recall that you have the general attempt statute in Title 13, and what that says is that if you have a felony offense essentially for an attempt at grand larceny would be the same penalty as for,
That's why I asked if it was necessary, because it appears that the House has decided to lessen the attempt penalty
correct.
from the general penalty, and I did that in another bill, and I don't understand that policy or why they're doing it, but I'll leave that to them to explain, but I think the committee had talked about, and I certainly would propose striking section 1.
Okay.
I don't see as it serves any purpose other than to lower the penalty.
And then the final note that I had here was just the discussion around, and then going back to section 3 again on OC around the use of knows or should have known. And so, again, I'm sorry I wasn't here for some of the testimony from law enforcement around why they are advocating for this, but my understanding is that that they're having difficulty proving actual knowledge on the part of the person who has taken the vehicle and operated it without consent. And so there's the additional language of the person knows or should have known.
Maybe I'm dreaming it, or maybe I read it on somewhere unrelated to this bill, but I think there's a lot of taking vehicles for the drug trade and then, ditching them or returning them to the rightful owner. I think that was part of the concern with so the reason for the should have known, but one of the decisions we should make is whether to strike or should know.
I think that's one of those situations, once again, where the state still has to prove that.
Right.
So I don't see any harm in simply leaving it there. It still has to be proven by the state.
I think I agree with Senator Sears on this, but I'm sure that comes as no surprise.
I'm on the fence, but I'm gonna keep thinking on it for a little bit.
Okay. Are there any other, so we strike section 1.
So section 1 on page 1 is what you're referring to, Senator Sears? All of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and section 2 is where we still have to make a decision about knows or should know. And that, interestingly, section 3, person takes, obtains, operates, uses, or continues to operate the motor vehicle of another when the person should have known, which is a little different than knows or should know. Should have known that the person did not have consent of the owner to do so. I find that that's 2 different phrases in the same bill on the knowing. What's the difference?
I think it's just, you're talking about just the, I mean, I can change it to be, it's just around the sentence structure. Person takes, person should know. You could just say should know.
Should have known.
You mean up in unlawful trespass?
No, I'm talking about section 3, line 17, the operation without.
Right, you could
consent.
say when the person should know that the person does not have
So,
consent.
going back to line 10 of page 4, we have knows or should know.
You can make it knows, you
Well,
could
which
make
is
it should
consistent.
knows.
I mean, it should
Should
be
know.
consistent, at least in this bill.
Sure.
if we decide to keep the should know, it should be the same with both. Or, you know, it's surprising. What the hell is a 3-month penalty or $500 fine for?
Where are you?
That's ridiculous.
Page 3, lines 12 and 13, or 13 actually.
How does that advance this problem?
Well, that's just mirroring the penalty that you have currently in subsection A for unlawful trespass.
Yeah, but this is operation without the consent. Isn't that a 6? I thought that was always a 6.
Wait, I'm sorry, I thought you're in section 2. What section are you in?
I'm in section
Page 2.
3.
Page 3, sorry.
Page 5. Person convicted of this section,
Oh, okay.
prison on more than 3 months. That was used to be a 2-year misdemeanor, right?
So what this is doing in the new language on lines 2 through 4 is creating, so right now you have for the operation when you know you shouldn't, that you don't have consent for the vehicle, it's 2 years. But when you're creating the should know, so a little bit of like a lesser standard, it has a lesser penalty, but just a policy decision for you.
So they're getting tough on theft, auto theft, and weakening the law. I don't like this bill. I think this bill is really just kind of a showcase. Well, we did something about auto theft, but actually they weakened the penalties.
Well, it doesn't change the current law penalties. You're just adding the new provision in section 3. And so that penalty on lines 2 through 4 is for the new provision only. It doesn't change the 2-year misdemeanor for the existing.
Well, then it should be a 2-year misdemeanor for this too.
Just as a general comment, I mean, really, my main focus is section 2. You know, the thing that I've heard from constituents over and over is just how unbelievable it is in their minds that somebody can just go inside their car, rummage around, and it's not even something that can really be investigated because it's not a crime and you can't, there's nothing to investigate. So that's my main focus really for this.
Okay.
And there were two, House Judiciary combined 2 bills. There was this bill, there was one bill, I think 564, that was just the unlawful trespass piece, which Senator Hashim, I think, had done a bill back in the House, originally introduced one. And so that became 564. And then 563 had these other 2 provisions in it, and they just combined them.
Okay.
Could I ask what the penalty is? Is this the penalty for OOC we're looking at right here?
It's a 2-year misdemeanor.
OOC? So what are we changing then?
In OOC, you're creating the should have known that you didn't have the consent, because there's already the crime of if you know that you don't have the consent and the penalty. And section 3 is creating an additional, not replacing, but additional way to approach the issue if the state has trouble being able to prove that the person had actual knowledge that they didn't have consent. And so if you use the should have known provision, that would have the lesser
I'm going to
penalty.
suggest that we strike sections 1 and 3 and just do section 2.
Okay.
That's, and 4, obviously. I don't know what we gain with either 1 or 3 that isn't already current law. And it just seems to me that by weakening the penalty, we're just giving state attorneys the ability to bring a large, the original OOC and then drop it down to of the lesser offense, 3 months. And I don't think that is, it's, people are looking at, and I agree with Senator Sheen, who's put it well, that the problem is people breaking into cars and rifling through your glove compartment, taking things or not taking things, but you come out and find your glove compartment's been gone through, or your, console or whatever else places you have in your car.
Well, that's an easy amendment for me to write. I know you have this, I think you have this blocked off until 10?
Yeah.
I can write that up if you, I don't want to push, but if you want me to write that up, and if you do want to
Is
vote
that
it this
agreeable
morning.
to the rest
Works
of the
for me.
committee to just do 2?
Yeah, but let me clarify that by saying, I think our OOC statutes need some serious looking at, where someone can come and take, and I've dealt with this personally in many different scenarios. Someone can come take my $50,000 car, drive it to Rutland, and leave it off, they get charged with OOC. I've gone as far as seeing someone take a car, if you cross state lines, you deprive the owner of ownership for a period of time. I've seen, probably back then it wasn't $50,000, took the car, brought it to a sandpit for 3 days. That should have been, everybody coming through and exchanging driving, they should have known that this kid didn't have this $30,000 car in a sand pit and they're driving up and down the road here. I don't think the penalties are strict enough for OOC. If they take my $50,000 truck, I'm a little upset about that.
Yeah.
And I got a $500 penalty, I don't.
Yeah, well, that's part of what I'm asking too, but it's also that current law allows somebody to be a 2-year misdemeanor for aggravated. I believe it's 2 years for aggravated.
No, aggravated, let me pull up.
Is 5 years.
Yeah, let me pull up the penalty. for
OOC, the
aggravated.
simple OOC is 6 months, is it?
No, that's 2 years.
2 years just for the kid that joyrides. The person who actually steals the vehicle with no intent of returning the vehicle is a 5-year penalty, I believe. And this would allow lesser penalties for the should have known.
With a lesser men's rights standard.
So under the joyride, it's 3 months instead of 2 years.
Right, so aggravated, you're correct, Senator Sears, it's 5 years and $2,000 penalty.
So aggravated, section 3 is currently 5 years, and this reduces it to 3 months.
Right, so, but also know that the grand larceny, I do believe that, so if it fits within the grand larceny statute, so remember, OOC is about the operation of the vehicle. So I don't know if in your circumstance, what you were talking about is the concern about, like, if the person the vehicle is stolen versus kind of used for, I think what Senator Sears was saying, maybe people take it, use it to take drugs or things like that, and then it's, but you can have an OOC charge as well as a grand larceny charge, which is the 10-year felony.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody pursue the grand larceny charges on motor vehicles. It mostly goes back to the OOC.
Mm-hmm.
And using the OOC standard, such as, you can use my car for 1 week, but I need it back by Sunday. It doesn't come back, then, okay, that goes back to, but if someone comes in my yard and takes my $50,000 vehicle, or yours, whatever else, I don't care what you're using it for. That's grand larceny, and it should be treated as such, not as an OOC. That's the point.
Right, and that was just have to be a conversation with.
Where we're at, Senator Cruz, is that we're considering that the section 2, the unlawful trespass, is the only section along with the effective date that we would pass the Senate, that we would strike sections 1 and 3, which don't seem to do what people were asking for, and I'm not sure we have a rash of actual car thefts. It's more of a rash of people breaking into cars. Senator Sheen pointed out earlier that most of his complaints are about people breaking into their cars, going through their glove compartments, etc.
Yeah, I'm hearing the same.
So Senator Sears, when I just went to look in my files to start doing this amendment for you, I see that you must have been thinking the same thing on March 20th, because I wrote an amendment that looks exactly like this then. So I already have one for you, which I can email to you now and send to Ben.
I did this on March what?
March
You're
20th.
so far ahead of yourself, you don't even know.
I think
Yes, I was.
I don't know if you asked me to do it or if I just was
I
like,
think
this is
I
where
asked
they're
you to
going.
do, I think I asked you to do an amendment striking sections 1 and 3.
Yep, well, I've got it right here, so I can send that to you.
So
I don't
after
know
all
if
the
it's edited.
testimony, we're right back where we were on March 20th.
Right, so I'm gonna email this to you and to Ben as well, and I will send it to editing, but if you do wanna vote it, I'll
Well, I
just
think
get
it
you the
would be
clean.
helpful to vote it now, and then, I have a problem that I'd like to discuss with the committee openly. Afterwards, I can start now while you're emailing this, and we can come back and vote on this. I have a problem with how we deal with this. Senator Ingalls asked our committee to look at it, but really, it's all about building it, and it's really institution stuff in those sections. But there is a real issue about the size. I mean, I'm not convinced that we don't need one and that we shouldn't build any one. There's a certain group who wishes that. There's other groups who would like to see it more like Maine. Senator Ingalls is going to send us the miscellaneous corrections bill. And I would think we could add to that bill if we want to continue to pursue the women's prison and the size and talk about that in committee. We could add that to the miscellaneous corrections bill that came out of the House. He said he wanted to send us that today, Lord.
The whole bill?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it deals with good time and stuff, policy.
I see.
Really.
Okay.
And then we could deal with the women's prison and take some testimony from the various groups. I think the only decision, I don't even think seems to be a size decision, but we could do that in the miscellaneous bill and have the same impact.
Do you happen to know if the work crew policy is in that miscellaneous bill?
I don't. I haven't read the bill. But
The work crew was in something we were looking at.
But we were gonna move it to somewhere else,
Yeah,
or
I forget which bill. it was.
deal with it somewhere else.
I don't remember.
It might have been the retail theft bill. It was somewhere that didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, they had just stuck
Yeah,
things in it. But I know we looked at it because Bob was asking us to hold off on making any decisions on the work group.
Well, until we discuss it, yeah. And I just thoughts on, pros and cons on both ends, obviously. We just have to get away from thinking about a work group versus a chain gang or whatever. That's not what we're discussing here.
Part of the problem is that we've been successful with diversion, and most of the people who used to go on work crew are now going to diversion or even pre-charge. So they don't get the numbers that they used to have. And so does it make sense to spend that kind of money on a program that isn't being used?
I think the difference is those individuals that we're talking about have been adjudicated. They're in the correctional facilities. The diversion program, which I sat on both diversion and reparative boards, are those who have gone in and have not been to the system. And they call it community service versus,
Work crew for, okay.
that's the difference between the two.
Well, I don't have any. That's there's another issue in the bill as we look at today is, should there be a work release program for men? Should the current Chittenden facility become a work release center for men? Whether or not it's even possible to redo that facility or build a new one. That's in the current institutions, Phil.
Yeah, and further, just let me comment on the work crew. After working there for a brief period of time, might add, I've seen this, these are voluntary programs. These individuals volunteer for this and get paid and get to go outside and ride in a van and be in the outdoors and do it. They want this ability, so regardless of what you call it, I mean, most people have problems with the name, what you call it, but these folks want to do this. It's like a mini excursion, a vacation for them. That's my only reason for it. So let's be careful what we do.
It's also an alternative to incarceration, it's my understanding.
I'm not sure if they, on a work group, they get time for off their sentence for participating in this. I mean, there has to be some incentive other than just going out smelling flowers on the lawn or mowing it.
Well, but community service has often been part of a sentence for, just perform 200 hours of community service plus. It's part of a probationary sentence, used to be anyway, I don't know if it still is.
Do we know what DOC's problem was with their work crews or why they oppose it or?
Well, the reason was the numbers are small and the number of people who don't show up for work. This is the community-based work.
Oh, okay.
Not what you're describing, what used to have at St. Johnsbury Work Camp, and there was another work camp at that time. It is, and many of them don't show up and then they get arrest warrants. And
We can't help those who don't help themselves, obviously.
so they have staff that do nothing.
Yeah.
Waiting for people to show up. That was what the testimony was from the commissioner.
Okay, so we're talking about two different work
You're
crews.
talking about two different work.
That one there, I can see where, we won't show them up why we do it, I can see that.
Then I'm just gonna send it to the copy room because I just sent it to editing at the same time I sent it to you and they're already working on it.
Okay.
So I don't know why.
I just got it.
Okay.
The network's evolving slow.
I know, but it's weird because when I'm just trying to send something right here, it takes much longer than if I send it anywhere else in the building. But, so like if I send it to Ben from my office, he'd get it like that. There's something.
It's weird.
They're like, you're not sending it to Ben, are you?
Right, he's right there, just talk to him.
I'm printing it out here.
Okay.
Do you think you've got problems?
Y'all ready for ceiling later this morning?
Oh, yeah.
So you,
Holy.
efforts on.
Has it been
letting
like
go or supposed to be
1,200 years we've been talking about ceiling?
I'm waiting to hear back.
It feels that way to me and I've only
I got hold of Mark.
3 years since Bryn left.
You said speaking from a personal.
No, we could have solved a lot of things by doing what I asked you to do on.
But he has, he'll be meeting with the rest of them.
On what?
On March.
Communication.
Right.
Maybe that's the way we should do it. Just midway through the
Yeah,
session.
I'm waiting to hear back from the folks I reached
Well,
out
you know,
to.
this
Tell
is the
Michelle.
process, right? There's no point in going back to what you thought,
Yeah.
2-3 weeks ago.
Makes it easy if they just
We don't
support them
care
on board, if they don't want to,
Kill
why
it,
they don't
like,
support
this
it. I
isn't
mean,
gonna
that's-
work. We almost.
That's
always
still may not be
agreed
arguable.
into the process on that, but we should do more of
That's
that.
it, arguable.
This is a driveway.
I knew.
It's just-
Contentious.
Ben, could you print one off for me too, because I just want to compare.
I already did it.
Okay. I just want to make sure, since I don't.
You can have this one if you want it.
Doesn't matter.
So basically, this comes down to a notice against trespass and
So, so what you had me do in this version is,
I gave mine away.
so looking at draft 1.1, amendment 563, March 20th, you eliminated sections 1 and 3. And then on the unlawful trespass, you had me remove the should have known. So that issue around whether or not someone, I think you were, hesitant around the issue of if someone gets in a car mistakenly or doesn't know. And so what you had proposed was, if you look at page 2 of the amendment, subsection C, a person who enters the motor vehicle of another and knows that the person does not have legal authority or consent of the person. So you may have, in those 3 weeks, reconsidered that and want to put that back in, which is easy enough for me to do.
I think one question I have, just to confirm, so, let's say somebody lives at the end of a long driveway in the middle of nowhere. Another person walks up that driveway, goes into the car, rummages around, the cops show up, and the person says, oh, I didn't know I wasn't allowed to go into this car. When it's blatantly obvious they don't live in that area, they don't own a car that looks like that, but they're still saying, I didn't know I couldn't go into this car. Would they still be able to prove that the person did know that they couldn't go into that car? If it's,
You mean, so like, is there just like a general default that everybody knows you shouldn't be, you don't have permission to go into somebody's car?
essentially,
Or-
I mean,
This is a defense, right, which is,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't know.
right, and so I'm just wondering about, the different facts and circumstances, obviously, if you're in the Hannaford's parking lot and 2 identical cars are parked next to each other, you accidentally go to the wrong one. Yeah, it's, that's an honest mistake, but, the situation where it's obvious to everyone that the person knows they can't go into that car, but they're saying, I didn't know. Yeah, might be a question for a prosecutor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's see your young lawyer brain working on all these fabulous, you have great questions that people haven't posed before. And sure, could somebody make that argument? Does that kind of fly in the face of reasonableness, that you walk down somebody's long driveway and start rifling through their car and
I could see if somebody was a neighbor, right? And had a relationship with a family or something, then I could see it. But if somebody's in a neighborhood unknown to them, I take your point.
Yeah.
How do you prove what someone knew or didn't know? But it would be like somebody assaulting another person and then saying, I didn't know, I couldn't. Seems almost that strained to me as an argument,
I agree.
What does for the consent of the person in lawful possession of the motor vehicle, doesn't that take care of that scenario?
Why do we have to have knows in there anyway? Why couldn't we just say
Oh, yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
a person who enters the motor vehicle of another and does not have legal authority?
Yeah,
I like that better, yes.
yeah.
I think that would drop the mens rea lower, wouldn't it?
right, so you'd be like strict liability, so if you do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the
I
thing,
think, no, you go ahead.
we could spend all day speculating, what about this situation, or what about that situation, or what about this scenario? And I think like the reality of it is we kind of need to zoom out and like recognize that it is somewhat fact specific, and we're never gonna cover everything that someone could do or should do, or how X prosecutor or Y prosecutor would prove it. So I think it's sort of a little bit dangerous, isn't really the word that I want. It's the only one coming to mind, to like start to focus really on one teeny tiny piece of every possible scenario that we could come to. Because I think, with Senator Hashim's example, a reasonable person would have known that they shouldn't do that. Whereas now, oh, well, now it's a neighbor, I think we have to remember that yes, we're gonna use the reasonable person standard, and yes, we're gonna use the mens rea, and yes, the prosecutor is gonna use the facts of that specific case, and it's not always gonna turn out the same way.
Ask you a question. So, in line 19, I think it's 19. Number one, the person doesn't have legal authority, or number two, they don't have the consent of the person for lawful possession. So even if they thought they had legal authority, they could still be charged because they don't have consent to the person who's.
So you only need one or the other.
Is that what I'm trying to, yeah.
Right, I see what you're saying is because sometimes or means or, sometimes or means or and.
What does or
In the
mean?
in the
Well,
context.
here, like, if you're, let's say, a police officer.
Yeah.
With a search warrant, you have legal authority, you might not have consent.
Right.
Or you could be a neighbor who has consent, but doesn't necessarily have legal authority without it. So I read it as one or the other in this
Right.
case.
I would as well.
So, scenarios, you don't have to have both.
No.
Right. So you could be charged if you didn't have consent of the owner.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to know that you don't have the consent.
Yeah.
Go back to the.
So but that would protect against somebody making an honest mistake and going into a car that looks exactly like their own, thinking it's theirs. Right?
I guess back to the reasonableness. I think if it's, where it says the person who enters the motor vehicle of a person without the consent, you could just eliminate a lot of them. Person enters the motor vehicle without the consent of the person in lawful possession of the motor vehicle. You eliminate your no's and your legal authorities and all that.
Like if somebody said, spend all day here. I think,
just pass it as is.
I think it helps.
I think it's fine.
So, Senator Sheen, wanna make a motion?
Make that motion.
Senator
Report in favor.
Sheen has moved that we report favorably H 563 as amended in draft.
And one question for discussion. When I came in, Senator Norris was talking about the $500, I think. Was that settled?
Yeah,
That was in section 3.
Section
Yes, it's
3.
gone.
Ah,
gone.
okay, because here we still have a $500 at the top of page 3.
That's current law, isn't
Well,
it?
it's underlined.
Well, that is,
Oh, I don't see
he was
it.
talking about in section 3, the lower mens rea established
I
in
see.
3, and that being a $500 penalty in 3 months. The penalty that is in section 1 here for unlawful trespass, the new provision that you have added mirrors the penalty under A1 that you have currently for unlawful trespass on someone's property, which
Got it.
could include a vehicle but isn't specific, and so it's the same.
Somebody that illegally trespasses on somebody else's property, it starts, into the backyard, the pool area. Doesn't take anything, but they're walking around in there, that's illegal trespass.
Right,
And it's the same offense.
right.
Okay.
So, is there any further discussion? None? Ben, would you please call the roll?
Senator Booth,
Yes.
Senator Norris,
yes.
Senator Walensky,
Yes.
Senator Sheen,
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes. Wow, 5-0.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And I just got word from editors that there are no changes, so the version you have is clean and can go upstairs.
Who, either Wyndham County or Chittenden County should report this stuff?
I would be happy to.
Maybe you could mention Chittenden County.
I'd also be happy to mention Chittenden County. Or we can flip a coin.
You should wrestle for it.
Michelle, this was draft 321
Let's one if I
and
love.
320. Was the date?
Is the date, yeah?
I got the condom bill, so.
There you go.
What
I remember I learned
is
about
it,
this.
stealth thing?
Yes.
Stealth.
Stealth is. And I do have I have most
You
of
have
your.
my definition with stealthing in it?
Well, I think the bill itself is the definition, but I did note that it's referred to as stealthing and.
Yes. For all of those who don't know what stealthing is today, you're gonna learn. This will be a lengthy report of about 3 minutes if I can get through it.
Yeah,
Do a-
the floor summary
Senator
is one
Doyle
page, it's
report.
very short, so,
Bill Doyle used to stand up literally 60 seconds. He would say, this is a bill to do this, and we took a lot of testimony, thank you very much. And he would sit down and nobody would question him, because we knew he couldn't, the interrogation almost could not happen, so we would just let it go.
His 30-second report on a 30-page bill.
Yeah.
Senator, would you, like me to see if I can get Damien down here a little bit earlier?
Yeah, we can take a break now until, say, take a long break till 10:15
All right.
and see if they can come in at